So I wanted to welcome everybody to the second in this series of webinars. So 2 weeks ago we did the first webinar, which gave us an introduction to the coding in SENS, and this week we're going to cover a little bit more ground in terms of how to adapt the questionnaires in a more advanced way. So adding questions and deleting some of the questions that aren't relevant to your particular session. Could I request that everybody mutes their microphones, please? I don't think everybody is muted yet, but if I could just reiterate that for the whole of the webinar, if you're not speaking or interacting, could you please mute? Faustine, could you maybe mute your microphone, please? Okay, I'll just wait till, because there's quite a lot of background noise, so I'll wait till everybody's muted.
Mm-hmm.
John, could you mute your microphone, please?
C'est ça. Vous voyez à gauche le bas de la page. Là, on écrit connected. Connected sur le bas de la page à droite. Il faut que le microphone là puisse se mouvementer là. Ah bon? Bon, attendez.
Okay, maybe we can start. Faustine, are you having problems?
Oui.
Tu as des problèmes?
Na mimi niko na kuona problème ni son.
Voilà. Okay, so I suggest that we get started. Sandra sent the agenda round. Sandra, do you want to? Well, Sandra and Francis, do you want to start with the review of the session one? Oops. I'll.
Sure. Hi. Hello, everyone. Very welcome. Happy to join you today as well for our session number 2. We do have, as Caroline pointed out, we do have quite a few more things to cover, but we did want to start with the review of the exercise. I'm trying to share my screen right now. with me 1 second. Okay, great. Can you guys hear?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Okay, very good. So, and the agenda, I'll put it into slide 2 so you can actually see it better. And we did send out the PowerPoint just an hour before the webinar, so if you guys actually want to follow along on your own computer. Since we had some comments last time that not everyone could actually see it very well on the screen, then please feel free to do so. Okay, so first we want to go through a little bit through the exercise, do a bit of a review, and also have some question and answers in case some of you have actually some specific questions on the exercise. And let me reiterate here what I've actually written in the email. You guys feel free to send in the first exercise. It did sound if some of you actually had difficulties in accessing some of the tools. And the links, don't hesitate to ping us anytime. We will actually get back to you with questions. Also, if you get stuck with some of the aspects, we're very happy to help you. And you still have the chance to send in the exercise 1. And just also to emphasize what I've written in the email, there will be a certificate at the end of the webinar. But only people that have actually sent in all the 3 exercises will actually receive a certificate. So in case you're interested in getting it, please send in your exercises. Okay, and after we have done a quick review on the exercise from last time, we'll look at how to mark, unmark, delete questions, and also look at advanced relevant conditions, because that will come into play once you start to mark, unmark, delete, or also add questions that you know a little bit more on how relevant conditions, meaning the skip patterns, are actually set up so that you can adjust them accordingly. Then we will have Caroline and Melody talking a little bit about what is an acceptable adjustment and what are acceptable additions to the global forums. Because depending, of course, on your local setting, you might have either requests from partners to add some more questions, or you just might need a little bit more information on certain aspects for which you actually need to add questions. And also, since this is also coming more and more, how to deal with urban settings, what's different, what to look out for, how can we help in terms of adjusting the form, or you yourself adjust the form to capture the situation in an urban setting as well. Then we will look into how to add a question that's currently not part of the global forums, and we will look into adding into the repeat groups. Repeat groups means like when members are repeating, like for instance the children in a household or the women in a household. We'll talk a little bit about using versioning when you start to adjust your forms so that you don't make use of the versioning. We'll look a little bit at managing the languages, and then we will do a demo and a hands-on for those of you who want to follow along on adding a question on the reproductive women questionnaire. And then last but not least, we will actually go through the exercise number 2 so that you know what is expected in exercise number 2, and that you can ask questions before we'll send it out after the webinar. Okay, great. Then this slide is just a quick reminder on the exercise 1 that you've been doing, or some of you have been doing. You were asked to adjust the camps, the section, the zone, and the blocks according to your current, or in case you're not deployed right now, on your last operation, including setting the ranges and the constraints that might go with those aspects. You were planning a cluster with cluster survey with up to 45 clusters. You were asked to take GPS points for all households. And then as a pointer, you were planning to conduct the survey in August this year. And you were asked to adjust the food groups according to your current or your last setting. And now I'll try and switch to the Excel so that you can actually see a little bit on which aspects to look out for. In the meantime, while I switch, maybe Francis wants to give a quick figures on people that have been submitting, or just general aspects that people run into difficulties. Francis, are you muted? Is your mic muted? If not, we can actually leave that question and tackle it a little bit later. I think it would be good just to get some stats on the exercise. Okay. First of all, I'm showing here how your file could have looked like. I mean, again, as all of you were asked to adjust it to your current setting, all of you will actually have slight differences in how you fill this. I can hear some noise in the background. Was there somebody wanting to say something, or? Okay, then I'll just continue. We've highlighted the aspects that we expected you to change. When starting with the survey tab, the first aspect was in line 6, select one camp, because there you were asked to adjust the camps. And since this is a select one question, a choices question, those changes you would have done in the choices tab, meaning here. Now here we have added 3 camps. It's basically the ones that I have added before. Which is basically a collection that wouldn't happen because all of those camps are in different countries, obviously. And here I've opted for putting letters as a name instead of numbers, but you were actually free to choose also numbers. What's listed here on the name as repetition of last time is basically what you will have registered in your database afterwards. Meaning I will now have for Zatari basically this word Zatari in there and not 1, 2, or 3. But it's totally up to you how you want to organize this. How it's best for your analysis and how you're used to do your analysis, you can actually set this up. Okay, going back to the survey tab. Here were aspects that you were to ask to change as well according to your section, to your setting. What type of sections, zones, or blocks you were using, and then the respective ranges that were linked to it. I mean, those ones will look different in your case because you might have a completely different administrative division in your operation or in the camp that you've chosen for your exercise. For the block here, I've put this with a, you could basically use either string or text, both works in your coding. So depending on what you used, either string or text. I mean, not both. This is just for you to see that both of them actually work in the coding once you've actually converted to an XML. The second you actually use string or text, then you most likely won't actually set any ranges or any constraint message. There's just one aspect in case you have a small number of blocks and you rather expect people to mistype them because you might have, A1 or whatever, a name of it and then a number of it. It's also always possible to change this to a select one field, which means that you're actually then spelling out all your choices here. You add a list name here, you put them all here. That means that people will actually not type it in, but will select from a predefined list. This is always possible as well, and there were some people that have returned the exercise that have done it that way, for instance. Okay, the aspect that you were asked to change as well was the cluster. We did say this is a cluster survey, and we did say that you have between 1 and 45 clusters. So you needed to adjust your constraint message, and you needed to adjust the constraint to 46 because we don't use an equal sign here, and in the message 1 to 45 because that's basically the range you want to allow. Okay, then we did say this is supposed to be a survey with a GPS, so you had to remove our relevant condition that we had set here. Let me just move to relevant here. It would have been here, and remove the 1 is equal to as well, so that this question actually appears on the screen for the enumerators. Then the next aspect that you were asked to change was basically to adapt the cycle of that you were referencing for how many days did the food last. And since the survey was supposed to be in August, you would either use if you have 2 cycles. I mean, some operations only have 1 cycle per month, and then you would adapt it either to a July or an August cycle, depending on what you assumed would be your start date for your survey. So any of it would be fine. And then the next question you were expected to adapt was actually the risky act question, where you were asked to really specify what type of risky acts might be present in your situation. I've put in here from a real setting. I believe that was from an old questionnaire in Kenya, where obviously charcoal burning, cutting trees, and then of course cross-border smuggling is a risky or a harmful activity. Okay, and then it was all those food questions, which I actually didn't adapt for this example. I just made it very, very flaggy and red, for which you were asked to come up with examples for your current setting as well. Okay, so this was what was expected from the first tab. On the choices tab, we've pointed out already the camp, and then there's the last tab, the settings tab, in which you were adapting or were asked to adapt the form title as well as the form ID, because the initial form had global in here because it was the global questionnaire. So you would actually put in the name of your camp or your operation. You would put the 3 letters for the form ID, and you would increase the versioning. I mean, it depends. If you start with the first form, you could leave the versioning as it is, but then with the higher you go, you would actually adjust this. I think I kind of did I just lose the sharing? Is it possible?
It seems that you did, because we can't see anything on the screen.
Okay, I'll just try and gain it back.
Let me see, Sandra, if I can do something.
Okay, I think somebody accidentally hit on sharing, and that's why I lost it.
Let me see if I can see who now.
It's not back yet, is it?
No.
No.
It's back.
Yeah, I'm actually at the end of it. Those were the aspects that I wanted to point out for the specific exercise. And maybe Francis wants to give an overview on what aspects we encountered when looking at the exercises. Each and every one of you has actually sent it in and receive individual response for the exercise as well.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can, Francis.
Hello? Awesome, great. Yes, so for the exercise 1, I did compile a bit of a summary. So for the most part, the adaptations for the CAN zone blocks were pretty well done for most people who submitted the exercises. A few times there were discrepancies between the constraint that were set and the constraint message that followed with it. It's not a survey breaking mistake, but it's a bit of an odd thing for the enumerators to have. When they enter something, it doesn't work, and then the message that comes up tells them it actually should work. A small thing that did not necessarily come up a lot in the example, but that I think is good to point out is, let's say that you have blocks and that these are not number but letters. It might be better to present it as a select one option if the number of blocks, the different blocks that are available are limited. For example, if you have blocks from A to letter F, if you put a text input, you're pretty likely to have a lot of different typos and mistakes. But if you set it up as a select one option and just give option A to F for each block, then you know you're going to get exactly what you expect in your output data. The thing, I don't know how people actually tested this, but when you set constraint on an entry, like anything like the zone, the section, and you put a range of numbers or the cluster as well, you should definitely test out different cases that are just above or just below what you expect you have set. It's pretty easy to just make a mistake in the sign to put greater than instead of smaller than. And if you don't notice it, then obviously you will actually prevent the good input that you need to be entered. So definitely something to actually test on the phone. In a few cases, the local example for the field groups, for the food groups, were not quite added. We're going to talk today about the languages. Some people did remove the extra language that they did not use in their survey, but not everyone. We'll talk about it later, but it's definitely a good idea to not leave unadapted translations into the form. And then more kind of a general remark. Attention to details for when you put in the examples for the food groups. I know in a few cases there was some copy-paste from probably an actual XLS form that they used before. But you could see sometimes that they were like a repeated word, for example, or parentheses that were kind of strangely placed. So maybe just kind of clean that up when you're there. And then if you experience some small difficulties about either starting or using or setting up the aggregate VM, in most cases we did just reply with a few additional instructions for that, and in most cases I think people have managed. Mostly about using the VM, it was not using the same Wi-Fi network on their phone that they were using on the computers. I think survey managers, when they are in the field, usually they use the hardware that is provided by UNHCR, which is already configured. So I guess the situation might not really arise too much. But in that case, maybe some people were actually on their data plan on the phone and the computer on the Wi-Fi. And then version of Java not upgraded on the computer. That caused some issue for some people. And yeah, I think in terms of observation for the first exercise, that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have some specific questions? I mean, as Francis pointed out, we definitely encourage you, if you want to follow through and you actually want to set up the VM, and it sometimes does take a bit of patience, because every computer has like slightly different settings, and it's with some settings you actually have to tweak things a little. We are definitely there and help you to set it up. However, what is also always possible is that you use the online app spot, which I'm going to demonstrate once more again at the end of this webinar, because that is certainly the easier version, and it functions more or less the same. But please don't hesitate to fire any kind of technical questions when you hit roadblocks to Francis and I, and we'll try to ensure that we help you along, so that you can get through with the full exercise, and also learn, if you so want, a bit of troubleshooting, which might happen next time in your next deployment as well, that you end up not being able to use the computer that was foreseen and aspects like that. And then having gone through this and getting an idea on what could be the issues and stuff is actually also helpful. It's also a kind of an important learning curve as well. So if you have like specific questions on the exercise, we could take them now, or you type them in to Caroline or to us, and we tackle them as we go along. It's up to you.
I have a question on the languages. Francis said that some people deleted the languages. So my question is, should we delete the entire columns of the languages, or should we hide them, or it doesn't matter? Thank you.
Hi, Melody. It would be better to actually delete them, and this will be an aspect of today's webinar as well, where we look at this in a bit more detail, and we explain why and which aspects need to be deleted and where you need to look out for. So if you don't mind, we would cover that a little bit later during this webinar. I just had a message from George saying that he cannot hear anything. George, do you want to actually try and connect potentially to Caroline and see if you can sort it out? Oh, you can't actually hear it. Sorry, George. I will need to. I guess I need to type it in. Or maybe Caroline, if you could ping George.
Yeah, I'll send a message to George separately.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, any other questions on the exercise? Okay, then I would continue with the presentation. So let me get the sharing back. You guys can see the screen again?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, great. Then let me move to the next. Next aspect we're going to cover. Someone has some nice birds in the background. Is it birds or is it a ringtone of a phone? It sounds or frog maybe. Sounds very rural. So today we are looking into how you can unmark or delete questions from global forms by either using the relevant condition or by deleting a question. So basically, this is an aspect that we have covered last week, not last week, 2 weeks ago in the last session already, that we have set up some conditions, some relevant conditions, 1 equals 2, which actually means that this question is hidden. And in the exercise, we had been asking you to take this off depending on whether that question should actually appear to the enumerator or not. In the current global forms, this is done for cluster and for GPS. In order to delete a question, there are basically, or to hide it, there are basically 2 different options. You could first just completely delete an entire row by marking the entire row and then delete it. Now, what's very important to know is that you should only be doing this for all the rows that are marked green, because all those are not necessary for the analysis if they don't apply to your local setting. And so we've tried to make this decision easier by actually highlighting the ones where you are basically allowed to delete them. The other option would be, which you could be doing in case you're just testing out something and you're not 100% sure whether this condition might apply to your situation or not. You could actually do what we have been doing in the global form, so that you add the impossible condition 1 is equal to in the relevant field. And that means that that question is still in your questionnaire, but it's hidden, meaning the enumerator doesn't see it and can't answer it. There's a slightly tricky thing if you do that. In case you do want to put the question back, it's very important that you go back to your original version and check what relevant condition that question used to have. Because if you want to use that question after all, you would need to make sure that the skip patterns and the relevant condition that goes with it actually remains exactly as it was in the global question. I can see that someone has raised a hand. Does that mean that there is a question? No. In case someone types into the chat, then maybe alert me. Looking further into the relevant column and the advanced conditions. As you can see, the last one that I've been showing as well, this is a rather complex one. Let me go back to the last one and just look at that once more. This is a rather complex one because this actually shows, depending on when someone the age, the calculated age, meaning based on the survey date and the birth date, or the months that have been input, that question will appear or not. So this is a more of a complex condition because you actually have to look at 2 different inputs. First of all, has there been an age calculated in case that the birthday was known, or has there been months input in case the birthday was not known, and then set up the ranges for which this question is actually relevant. And this particular question is relevant for the children below 2 years and above 6 months, basically 6 months and equal. Now there are, of course, relevant conditions that are a little bit more simple, if you so want, and that's basically we only want questions to appear when the family or the mother has given the consent. And this is basically a relevant condition for the consent question, which on the child questionnaire is set as CH const for child consent, basically. You would then set the condition for that. And since this is not a condition that's based on a manual input, meaning you actually have not typed in anything, but you've selected yes, no, or absent, you would need to denote this with the value that has actually been coded against the labels. So these are the labels, yes, no, or absent. And you want the question only to appear once someone has given the consent, which means that you need to pick what's under name, the value is equal 1, because 1 means someone has said yes. So if the relevant is actually set on a select question, you actually have a bracket selected, you have the name of the variable with $. I mean, that's just something that you can always copy and paste. But then it's important that you include the value here, which is 1 in this case. Why do we do this? Because once someone has not given a consent, we actually don't want the enumerator having to swipe through lots of irrelevant questions where actually nobody is going to give an answer. Same if a child is absent. So we want to exclude the version either that the mother has not given the consent for the child, and we want to exclude the option that the child is absent, because it doesn't make sense to swipe through the questions if any of those conditions are present. Okay. So one thing to take away from what I've just been explaining is that whenever you are adding a new question, you would need to think of the relevant conditions. Is it a question that always needs to be asked, except if there has not been a consent? Is it a question that always needs to get asked, like the administrative divisions that you will actually go through even if the household doesn't give the consent, so that you actually know in terms of where you stand on your sampling rate? Or is it a question that depends on the input of another question? Typical example would be for aspects where you maybe have somebody check. Good. Great. Yeah, I think it's better now. Aspects would be that for choices, sometimes when you have choices like other, and you actually would want to spell out the other choice, then the next question could be, if other, please specify, which would be like an example of that is built on an input that has just been given previously as well. The good thing is most of the relevant conditions that you probably will need when you add questions are somewhere used in the form already. It probably will be rare that you have examples where it goes completely differently because you're adding a couple of questions and not just one. So you could actually copy and paste from some other examples, but what you always need to do is that you test just to make sure that you work.
Sandra, I'm going to try and mute everyone. Hopefully you won't mute as well, but I'm going to try and just force everyone into silence. and then hopefully it won't silence you. Hang on.
Okay.
There you go. Can you say something?
Yes, you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. And now it's over to some survey design aspects, for which I'll hand over to Caroline and Melody. I've mentioned already, the idea will be to talk about which aspects can change and which cannot, which additional questions are likely and acceptable for SENS, and how to deal with urban things. And I will mute myself now as well. Caroline, Melody, take it over.
Oh.
Caroline, you want me to stop sharing the screen?
Well, no, it's fine. You can continue. You can continue like that. But Saidu, if you can hear me, the noise is coming from your side. That's what my screen is telling me. So could you make sure that you put yourself on mute, please? Bon. I'll try. Saidu, because you're logged in twice, and aha, that's better. You've muted. Great. So I don't have any slides, but I did want to talk just quickly about when you may want to change some questions, either deleting questions or adding new questions. Now, one of the main areas where we know that you will have to change or modify at least the questions is if you do a survey in an urban area or a survey out of camp in a situation that really doesn't resemble a camp. I'm going to send you a link to. So I've just sent the link to everybody on the chat, which is sorry, Mark, Mark. Yeah, which is for the out of camp addendum, and the out of camp addendum can be found on the SENS website. The out of camp addendum will give you guidelines on methodology, so certain choices of methodology, but it will also give you some tips on what kind of data or what kind of information you will need to delete from the standard questionnaires, and also what kind of information you may need to add. So if I could encourage you all just to have a look after the webinar at the out of camp addendum and familiarize yourself with that a little bit. So the questions in this that you will for sure need to change are mainly those on food security and WASH. Because in an urban situation or an out-of-camp situation that doesn't look like a camp at all, a lot of the questions from the food security module just won't be appropriate. If the population that you're serving isn't receiving food assistance, then all of the questions in the food security module that talk about food assistance will no longer be relevant. So you would have to delete them and maybe add some new ones. the same for the WASH questionnaire. If your populations in an urban situation have piped water into the house, so they actually have a tap inside of the house, all of the questions that relate to how many water containers do you have, how many times have you filled them, etc., won't be relevant. If they have no water storage because they have a continuous sorry, Samuel, that was you. I've just muted you. Yeah, for the water. Yeah, if they have a continuous supply of water in the household and they don't have any water storage, then of course all of the questions on how is the water stored, is it in a covered or narrow neck, you wouldn't have to use them. So that's concerning the out of camp situations where you really will have to modify the standard questionnaires. In other questionnaires, you may, even in camp settings, you may want to add some additional questions. Now, these additional questions may relate to the country of origin of the refugees. If you have two very distinct population groups within the same camp, you maybe need to, or you maybe want to add a field on whether the refugees, that household, originates from country X or from country Y. You may want to look at differences, for example, in the time of arrival, because you may have two distinct populations, one that have arrived recently in an influx over the last few months, and others that have been staying in the camp for many years. And that's the type of questions that you may want to adapt. There may be some additional health questions that you would like to add, as long as they're relevant in your context and are going to be useful for program decisions, and we'll be able to analyze them properly. Then there is some scope for modification, and this webinar is going to help us in how we can add and or delete questions from the standard questionnaires. I think I'll stop there. And Sandra, I'll pass over to you again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then our next point will actually be on how to add a new question. I'll go back to slide view so that you can actually see it better. And we'll look a little bit more into this from a theoretical point of view, and then we'll do the demo with hands-on, where you can actually also follow along. The idea for our exercises for the hands-on demo is that we add a new question, in this case a MUAC for women, which is actually a real case scenario. We have been asked to add this in some of the operations, as some operations do like to capture that as well. And is a, let me move this a little bit. I think somehow I lost the sharing. Is it possible? You guys can still see the screen or not?
No, we can't, Sandra.
Right.
I don't know how I didn't do anything. I didn't kick you off, but
it seems to me when I actually try to move the video, it actually makes me lose the screen sharing, which doesn't really make that much sense. But what can you do? Okay. Oh no, I think someone else has been sharing or has been hitting on sharing. That's why I lost it.
Okay, it's back.
It's back. Okay. again. So the example here is adding the MUAC for women. And the good news, if you so want, on this is because we actually already have women in the child module. You could, in theory, copy it from the child module and then adapt it to the women module as well. What is important to think about is what units you are going to use. In the current Global Child Forum, it's set up in centimeters and will be calculated for you in millimeters, hidden. You actually don't see that, or the enumerator is not seeing it, but you actually see it once you download the data from aggregate. You will actually see that you have also column filled where your centimeters have been calculated into millimeters. But depending on your settings, you actually might take them in millimeters in the first place as well. So that's something that you would need to think of. Now, in terms of the skip patterns that are linked to the MUAC, obviously the MUAC should not be asked if the woman refused to answer the survey, if she doesn't want to participate, then that needs to be captured. And more important, if you actually copy something over from another global questionnaire, you actually need to really check the relevant conditions, because those ones might, the fields might just be named slightly differently. And in the MUAC in the child is age dependent. So you cannot actually leave it in as it is there, because that would not apply to the women as well. So you would need to look for a relevant expression from another question and then copy it over. Now, what I didn't actually pinpoint here, but that might actually be the case, that you might only want to ask the MUAC question not only if the woman has actually consented, which is of course the most the first and most important condition. But then in many operations, the MUAC is also only being asked to women that are pregnant, meaning that you're not taking both. You're not taking the HB and the MUAC at this, but just one of it. And if that is the case, then you would need to adapt the MUAC further to cater for that particular situation as well. And as mentioned before, whenever you change the skip patterns, you really need to test it well to ensure that it actually works for all of the cases that you have actually come up with. Okay, then one aspect that we probably have to point out here as well is the repeat groups, because you might have questions that you might want to ask on a household level, and you might have questions that you might want to ask really each individual, and how to ensure that you place it in the right part of your survey as well. So if you look at the forms, and I'll show that on the Excel in just a minute. Once a repeat group starts, it's actually denoted by begin repeat. The screenshot here is for the child questionnaire. So begin repeat C basically means this is now when the part on all the questions that are being repeated for each and every child in the same household are actually starting. And this group is then closed by a end repeat. And once the end repeat is closed, then you are back to the general part, the household part of a questionnaire. Now, you don't want to, questions that are basically the same for each and every household. You don't want to have them in the individual part, in the member repeat part, because that would mean that you actually have to answer the same question over and over again, which you do want to avoid. However, if it is a question that might be different for each and every member, and where it's important to capture this difference, you then need to think of placing it into the repeat group and seeing in which order you actually want to put it, or where you want to put it in the repeat group. This is a little bit more tricky in the child questionnaire, in that sense that the order has been set up to respect the way you need it in NR, so that you basically don't have to shuffle around columns all that much, but just to delete columns when you actually do the analysis in NR. But other than that, it makes sense to put it where it's most logical in terms of the question flow for your new question to be added. So to repeat, so when you add a new question and you have that question to be appearing either in the women or in the child questionnaire, you need to think whether it should be inside the repeated group or whether it should be outside of the repeated group, because it's actually more a household question. Okay, then two more theoretical topics, and then we go to the demo. The versioning. This is rather important. How to use a system to manage your surveys, to manage the changes of your surveys as well. And we usually do this in the settings tab, as well as the full name of your Excel file. Like for instance, the Excel file as such that you are using when you're resaving it as your local version does not really matter that much to aggregate or the system, but it's quite rather important for your own file management, so that you really know, okay, this is a new version, this is a new sequence. So adding a new version number, counting up of the version number makes a lot of sense, so that you are always sure that you use the latest XLS file for your work. Now, in terms of the form title, this is basically what appears for the enumerators on the phone. So if you do have a new version number, you should also put it in the form title, that if for some reason, even though you should always clean out the old versions from the phones, but if for some reason there has been a hiccup, that it's always clear which version number they should be referring to, because you can actually tell them, okay, you need to use version 3.5, or we are at version 3.5. The form ID, that's something I had been mentioning at the last webinar as well. This is really what aggregate needs to manage the surveys. So if you want to try a new version and you're not changing this, aggregate, it will not allow you to upload the form. It will tell you that there is a conflict. It already has the same form in the settings. So it makes lots of sense to change that as well and have these all consistent, like the file name, the XLS form file name, the form title, the form ID, and the version number. Now you can of course debate a little bit on what is a significant change, and this depends a little bit on you as well, but the best is really to change the version every time you make a change, especially, and that's really important, especially if you plan to give it to someone else to test, or you send it out, because that is for sure when you actually have to change the version number. Because if you end up sending the same number to the people to test, they will get confused. Well, which is now the one that I need to test? They all are the same at first glance. So this is quite important. If you are just testing for yourself, then of course you could be a bit more relaxed about it. Just because you're changing the label doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change the full version number. But as soon as you really add something more complex to the structure, like you're changing a relevant condition, you add a question, you just want to try out something, and you're not quite sure whether it works out, it does make sense to change the name and the version number. If you do want to try out something, then it might make sense to just label a test so that you know that you can always go back to the last working version in case your test actually doesn't work out. So it depends also a little bit on you and how you organize yourself, but you need to really make sure that you know perfectly in which level you are, and that the soon you actually share it and you send it out to other people, or you test it and deploy it on aggregate, that you actually are changing the version number, to not get confused. Okay, and then the last topic, theoretical topic, is managing languages, which we have been talking about a little, and where we also had received some questions. How to keep and only the relevant languages for your context, and also why you should be doing this. Now, one of the main reasons why you actually should be doing this, if you know for sure that you're not going to use a language in your context, is as long as the language is still available on the forum, an enumerator could actually be changing the language on the phone. So, however, if you have not updated that particular language, if you haven't updated the options, if you haven't updated, basically, on the food security, for instance, the options, then the enumerator could, in theory, be saying, okay, I do want to read it in Arabic now. Switch it to Arabic, but actually it's not the current version of the survey, because you actually haven't adapted the Arabic part of the questionnaire. So it does make sense to only keep those versions that you're for sure going to use. There could be contexts where it does make sense to even keep, more than two, but really make this a conscious decision, because it does mean that you actually will need to make sure that the translations and the adaptations on the labels are all done simultaneously, so that the survey is updated for all the languages that you're still serving it out. Now, there are several columns where the languages are specified. One aspect is on the survey tab here, where you have the denomination label, then twice the colon, and then the language name as well. So here is like one part where you would actually need to remove, and getting back to Melody's question, you would actually need to delete the full column to remove the language. However, there's more than that in the survey tab. There is not only the label bit, there's also the hint bit. And the hints have the same denomination. They say hint colon, and then the language name. So if you are removing a language, then you should not only remove the labels, but also the respective hints that go with it. And then you still have the languages referenced once more in the choices as well. So it does make sense to also remove them from the choices tab as well, so that you only retain those choices that you have been updating. Additionally, there is one aspect we have been mentioning last time as well. You are able to set the default language under settings. On all of the global questionnaires, this has been set to English, which means the moment you open ODK and you open the questionnaire ODK, it's actually the default language that appears to the enumerator, English. And then if the enumerator wants to switch and there's an additional language, they can do it via the phone. However, if you know that your English is not going to be your default language, then by all means change this to French, or if it's Swahili, then Swahili, or Arabic if it's Arabic. So there are some additional explanations or additional details if you want to languages. On the camp side of things, it would be good if you actually keep the same name for all the languages, simply because it will actually appear on the camp label. This is something new that we had been inputting into the global forums. This helps you if you're using figures instead of abbreviations or something as the values. You have the camp labels appearing in the data as well. And this would actually look really, really messy if you used different wording for the camp in the different languages. So you would then need to decide on what is the common wording that everyone will understand, and then put that in for all the languages that you're keeping. Okay, to delete the language, just to repeat once more, you need to delete the whole column. That is the label, that is the hint, and that is also the column in the respective choices tab. What is important, because that sometimes can happen if one, does some modifications and doesn't pay attention, the name of the language must match for all of the columns that are used to specify the language. This is especially important because occasionally we also have the request to put in a different local language where the server manager used a translator, and it's totally possible to do that. If you have another language and you have the translator that can actually help you to translate all the options. There's the possibility to input another language other than the 4 that are already there. And it's then very important that the naming of the language is consistent throughout all the columns where the language is being referenced. And it's also very important that you don't miss the double colon. That can easily happen too with changing and copying, pasting. Okay, maybe a small advice if you are using a translator. It's probably the easiest to let the translator, if they're comfortable enough in using Excel, to just hide all the columns, or you regenerate a version for the translator where you hide all the columns, and then having the translator doing the translation directly in the Excel file. This will be easier than doing the copying and pasting, especially for Arabic, because depending on where Arabic has been written, copy and pasting it into Excel is not so very straightforward because of the order being the other way around. Especially if you have to use colons and brackets and things like that, because they end up appearing the wrong way. And this also especially comes into play for columns or for labels where you're actually referencing the output of another question. You actually need the colon as well. So that's just a piece of advice. For Arabic, it certainly would be a lot better if people do it directly in Excel than you trying to copy and paste it Arabic that has been written in another format on another. Okay, so I can take questions now while we prepare the files in the hands-on demo. Any questions? Okay. We do, yeah, we are a bit tighter on time than we were last time. So shall we try and go along at the same time? Meaning I explain on my file and you guys follow along on the file that we had sent out.
I think we could try that, Sandro. Yeah.
Yeah.
Given the time, because we don't have that much time left.
Yeah, precisely. Okay, no, that's good. I think the version that has been sent out to you might already have the MOAC in. So if everybody wants to follow along, I could actually open the Global Women file and just check. So mine doesn't have it, but just check whether you have it in there or not. And if you do have it in there, just delete the full row, please. Maybe anyone who's actually following along can give me feedback. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Melody. I'm afraid that would have been the case. So just delete this line, please, for me. And sorry about that. That was not supposed to happen. Okay. So let's try and go back to what I had been explaining before. We do want to add a MOAC question, and obviously, since the MOAC question will be asked to each and every individual woman, it should actually be in the group, in the part for the women questionnaire. The women questionnaire starts on line 17 with the begin repeat. You have a begin repeat and then the name W for women. And that's basically where all the questions start that are being asked to the women. While we are at this part, I can actually also let you know that everything that you see in there, which is kind of calculated, is something that's actually not appearing to the enumerator. That's just something where we repeat aspects of the general questionnaire. So that you guys have it easier later for the analysis, and that you can actually filter according to camp and date and so on and so forth. But this just as a side explanation. So usually you probably would want to add the MOAC question just before the HB question. So I'm highlighting this right now. I'll insert a row here, and I will actually insert 2 rows because we have the tapes in centimeters, but I do want to actually have the value in millimeters later as well, like we currently do for the child as well. Okay, so I've added 2 empty lines here. And now I'm going to my global child file. So you have to open that your end as well. And going to locate the MOAC on that one. So that would be line 39 and 40. I would be highlighting those 2. And then hit on copy. Then go back to my global women and paste it here. Okay, so far so good. We did say that we have to look at the relevant, and in fact we have to look at probably more than the relevant as well. We probably also have to look at the constraint, because the constraint as it is set up right now is actually set to the child constraint as well. I don't know if this is adjusted a lot actually by heart. Maybe a nutritionist can help me there if we actually need to adjust this a lot. And let me know which figures I should be typing in here.
Yes, we should. It should be changed quite a lot. We don't have specific cut-offs, and we haven't really looked at the constraints on that yet. But for the purposes of the exercise, why don't we do sort of 15 to 35, something like that?
15, sorry, I'll type in 15 and 35.
Yeah.
35 still being accepted then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that means that I obviously should be adjusting also the constraint message. Should be between 15 and 35 centimeters. I remember, I think in one setting where this was really high, it was more than even 35. Can't remember where it was, where I was quite surprised.
Yeah, it could be, and like I say, this isn't set in stone. It's just something that, for the sake of the exercise, we can do it here.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that you would, if you actually want to use the work question, obviously you will have worked that out for yourself. And at the end of the day, the idea is just that you prevent enumerators to do typos and type in really impossible measurements as well. Okay, so I've adapted those two aspects, and then I still have to look at my skip pattern, at my relevant. And here I still have the skip pattern for the child in there. So obviously that one is incorrect. So I'll remove it. Now the question is, for the sake of the exercise, do you want this question to appear for each and every woman, or you just want the question to appear if the woman is pregnant?
For all of the women.
For all of the women, okay. In that case, that's very easy, because then at the end of the day, we are going to just copy and paste the women consent. This case, this is abbreviated with WM consent. Just let me move up here so you can see. So WM consent, it means consent given. If I look at my choices, consent, this is the list name. So let me demonstrate that once more so that you can see it better. So the women consent is here. The list name for my choices is called const. If I then go on my choices tab, const here has the label yes, no, absent, 1, 2, 3. So basically the same as I have been showing you in the PowerPoint before, which means that if we copy this one out, selected women consent, value 1 is consent given yes. We shouldn't be wrong. So we use this, we copy, we move further down to our work and just paste it there. So this question will then appear to all the women that have given consent to the survey, basically. Okay, I think I had a ping from Melody on something, but it was just there for a split of a second, and then I think it was about the 15, right? If I recall correctly. And she is right. If we actually want to allow 15, then I need to change this down to 14.9, for instance, to ensure that 15 is actually allowed. I think that was her point. Or I could put an equal as well, which in this case, it doesn't matter the size because we actually have put an equal. So 35 is accepted as well. But a good point. Thanks, Melody, for highlighting this. Okay, so we have added our MUAC question. Now we still have the global name for this. I'm not going to change all the bottom part and the front part on camps and so on for this for the sake as the time is already a bit moving. But I will definitely still change the form title. So I'm calling it Utopia again. As it's my first Utopia version, I'll leave the version as it is. Utopia and all that, I still leave English, and then I'm ready to save my Excel file. Okay, so I'm calling it Utopia, and then okay. Did people manage to follow? Shall I wait a moment before I do the conversion? Did you have any feedback, Caroline, on the chat, maybe? Okay.
No, I have nothing. No questions in the chat.
Okay, then maybe I'll take that as a sign that people were able to follow along. And then I will do the conversion on the online converter, just because there were some people that actually had difficulties in having the offline converter run. And as I said before, we are there for you if you need help to get it run. Please ping us. But there is also the easier version on using the online converter, which I'm just going to demo once more. So let me go to Chrome, and here. So on this URL, you have that also on the PowerPoint if you need the URL again. So I'm going to choose my file. This is not the one. Session 2, my Utopia Women. Going to open it and submit, and let's hope I didn't make a mistake. I did not. The nice thing about this converter, once more, I had been showing it before already, is actually that you can just get a preview on how it looks like with on the web form. So I could quickly check, I'll type on yes here. So it seems that the question is not appearing if I haven't given in the consent, so that's a good sign. So that part we already did correctly. And then if I click on yes, the MUAC should come up. Yes, it does. So that's very good. If I now type in 40.9, it should not allow me. No, it does not. And if I type in 35.1, it should also not. No, it does not. So this is kind of also nice if you ultimately always need to check this on the phone, because this is a web form. It's pretty good to get a good overview, but some aspects don't work the same in the web form as they do in the phone. So before you deploy, you will always need to check on the phone. But if you do have internet connection, you just want to have a quick look whether a label has changed properly or something, and then you could actually be using this. So it seems to be working okay, so that's that's all good. So I do want to download it and then upload it to Aggregate. So I click on the download button here. I'll have my XML, and then go to Aggregate. I would need to log in. No, I hope when I move this now that I'm not losing again my. No, looks good. Very good. Logging in. It's not the credentials that you have on your PowerPoint. It's just that Google has memorized those. But they do work with the credentials that you have on the PowerPoint as well. And on form management, it's basically the same as you have been using it on your VM as well. You just click on Add a new form. Takes a bit long, so maybe many people are accessing it now at the same time. Okay. And then oh yeah, I have to get it from the download folder, don't I? Okay. Sorry, I'll have to filter for today. Otherwise my bit convoluted. Yeah, here it is. And I load it. I upload my form. Okay. And here is my form. Someone else has uploaded it at the same time, it seems, but with a slightly different naming. So, with Utopia spelled out. So that's the only reason why we don't have a conflict here. Is if the person who's uploaded this one has actually spelled Uto as well, then we would have had a conflict. But since each and every one of you is actually adapting it to your current operation, you should not run into this issue, because the chances that you will have exactly the same form ID is not very high. Okay, great. Then, unless there are any questions to this, I could introduce the exercise for the coming 2 weeks.
Does anyone have any questions? You can either say them or write them in the chat to everybody.
Okay, I'll take that as a sign. I mean, again, if there are questions that are popping into your head after this, do not hesitate to send us an email, and we'll certainly get back to you. So the homework for the next 2 weeks will be to adapt the child questionnaire. So we would want to have the same changes as for the food security module, meaning you are adapting it to your local setting for all of the questions, and like using the same administrative divisions, for instance. Unless, of course, you want to, you had made them up in the first place and you actually want to use a different one, then that's fine too. But the idea is that you're actually adapting it to your current setting that you're in. So that means you adjust the camps, the sections, zone, blocks, and so on and so forth. We will actually include 5 reserve clusters this time. So we will set the we will set the cluster a bit higher, and we will also use GPS for all of the households. So let me move this a little that you can see it better. There. So what we do expect is that you adjust the versioning according to what we had been explaining, and that you will be using the languages as to your setting, meaning removing all the languages that you wouldn't be using in your setting as well. And now there is a little glitch here. Your MUAC tapes are actually in millimeters and not in centimeters, so you would be asked to adjust this accordingly. Okay. Then we'd ask you to keep English, but then for the other languages, use the ones that are also appropriate and relevant in your context. All the food-related questions on the nutrients and fortified foods and so on and so forth, please adjust them also to the program of your current or your last operation and what was being used there. And then we would want to add an additional question, the arrival dates as a list of options, like the question, when did you arrive in camp? And we'll have the options, since the survey is supposed to happen in August, and we do want to have a quarterly for 2017. We want to actually have a quarterly breakdown. You have the one quarterly option, and then before 2017 and born in camp. And you should be making the default language convenient for your numerator. So depending on your context, what your numerators will mostly use. Okay, then deploying your form is basically the same as it was last time, and as I had been demonstrating with the two online tools that you could be using. You should be using Briefcase to download the CSV files, because especially the children will not work through the download button on aggregate, as you will not be getting the children part. You will only be getting the household part if you click directly on aggregate. So if you have difficulties in getting Briefcase to work, please get back to us. Now this is not something that is kind of necessary for the sake of the practicing the coding, but it's kind of quite good practice for your next deployment, where you for sure will be using Briefcase again. Okay, I think this the instructions are the same as they were last time, just so that you have them at the tip of your fingertips. And same with this one, so this is also not new, just reiterating the login and the password in case you want to try through the App Store. Now I did have a question, I think Caroline, which was from, was it Tiras, no? On the pregnant women, wasn't it? If you actually just want to ask the pregnant women. Would you be able to repeat it, because it just popped up on my window and then it was gone again?
Yeah, actually, Francis has just replied by chat, but it was what if we wanted to take MUAC just from a specific group? So, for example, only pregnant women. And yeah, Francis has guided everybody to the WHHB variable in the woman's form, which gives the coding for selecting consent equals 1 and not pregnant.
Yeah, If you wanted to only do it for pregnant women, you could actually go a slightly easier path as well, because it's based on a positive condition and not a not selected condition. You could just only put in relevant for if pregnant is one. Then you could leave out the variable about the consent, because if pregnant has not been ticked, and pregnant will only be ticked if the consent has been set to yes, that question will also not appear. But if you wanted to have the MURAC being asked for the non-pregnant women, then it would be better to do it the other way around. So it depends a little. There is actually, for Kenya, often the questions are even more complex because they also include a question on breastfeeding, and then depending on whether someone is breastfeeding, the HB might also not be asked, but then the MURAC is asked. And so it depends a little bit on whether you can just base it on one positive condition, in which case it's often enough just to reference the positive condition, or if you actually need to reference several conditions, and then it depends a little. It depends a little on how detailed you need to go on this. Did that make sense? Or did I confuse everyone now? It's let me see, there should be a question on the women where I could actually show it probably better. Like for instance, the ANC question is only being asked when you're pregnant. So it's sufficient for this one to actually say selected pregnant equals 1 equals yes, because it's a positive condition. So if someone is not pregnant, then this question will not appear at all. And since pregnant is dependent on the women consent, it's okay to use the more simple version if you so want. But depending on how you have to accumulate your conditions, then sometimes you need to reference more than one condition to make sure that the question appears according to the situation. So was that clearer?
Yep, well, it seemed pretty clear to me. Thanks, Sandra.
Yeah, I could actually explain also why, because the pregnant question, let me see the list. The list is yes, no, don't know, because there could also be women that don't know, and that's why you actually have 3 different choices, and that's why that in the if you want to have a question that's not being asked only to women that are clearly identified as pregnant, you actually have to combine the 2 conditions, because it's not a positive condition, it's basically a not condition, if you so want, and that's why you have to combine it for the HB. Okay, are there any more questions or any comments? Anything? I think we are slightly over, but then I think you booked a little bit of time so that people could still ask questions, isn't it, Caroline?
Yeah, we still have 15 minutes or so. If people have more questions or comments, yes.
Okay, I'll click on stop sharing for now then.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? If I mean, if there are no more questions, we can wrap up. But if you do, please just send a quick message to everybody, or ask your question directly. Okay, Sandra, it doesn't look as if there's a rush on questions.
Okay. No worries. I mean, as I said, you can just ping us afterwards, and maybe once you look at the exercises for the exercise number 2, you might have more questions. Just important. The next date is the 27th in 2 weeks' time. Same time at 1 o'clock Geneva time, just for you to mark the dates. And as I said, for those of you who haven't sent in exercise 1, please do so. And yeah, we'll be waiting then to hear back from you. Francis, you were going to say something? I saw you raising a hand. I guess maybe that was just by accident. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for your attention. Was lovely to actually have you around and have you follow our second edition of the webinar. And looking very forward to receiving your exercises, your questions, and of course seeing you at the next webinar in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Carol. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.